Hey everybody, my name is Nol Honig, and I'm a director and a designer and an animator, and I live in New York City. I'm also a teacher. I teach the classes After Effects Kickstart and Expression Session at School of Motion. This is part 3 of the So You Want to Animate Lab series, in which Sarah Beth Morgan and I show you how you can bring your designs to the next level using subtle animation. First of all, I just want to say how awesome Sarah Beth Morgan is. I hope you were really inspired to work with her. One thing that you should know about me is that I've been teaching motion design for about 20 years, and I know that it can be intimidating to approach After Effects. But I got you covered, okay? In this session, I know that I can cover the fundamentals in a way that will be both educational and fun. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to work first with a really simple example, and I'm going to show you the whole After Effects workflow in one go, okay? And then in the next session, in part 4, I'm going to animate Sarah Beth Morgan's illustration, okay? But first, I just want to break down the process for you and demystify it so you can see it from beginning to end, because pretty much anytime you're ever going to animate anything in After Effects, you're going to take these same steps. I just want to say right away that people who learn design first and then motion actually have some pretty big advantages. So let's go over those real quick. For one, if you already know Photoshop and/or Illustrator, I think you have a big leg up when it comes to learning After Effects. Basically, knowing some Adobe software means that it's much easier to learn new Adobe software. And in this case, I think Adobe's done a really good job of building some good workflow connections between After Effects, Illustrator, and Photoshop. Definitely a lot of the keyboard shortcuts are the same, as well as some of the tools in the toolbar being either exactly the same or very similar. So I think they've done a really good job of integrating the software, and I think you'll be able to approach After Effects intuitively because of that. All right, so that's the first thing. And your second big advantage is one that people don't talk about as much, but I think is really important, okay? And what I mean is that good design is often much more important than good animation, all right? Basically, good design will elevate mediocre animation, but amazing animation will never save bad design. And often when people judge your animation, what they're actually judging is the design a lot of times, okay? Because if the design lacks appeal, let's just say, nobody's going to stick around to watch the animation to see if it's awesome. And by the way, this is why it was so smart of Sarah Beth Morgan to emphasize the kind of level 1 animation that we're doing here. I want to double down on this and just say that since you're already great at design, you should keep your animation subtle and let the design be the star of the show. And finally, I'll be around this whole time to answer questions in the chat pod if you have any, so please feel free to ask. Learning the basics of After Effects is not actually that hard. I kind of think about it like learning to play the guitar. It's not that difficult to learn a few simple guitar chords and bash out a song, right? Learning the guitar isn't the hard part. Getting good at playing the guitar is hard, and that just requires a lot of practice. And basically, After Effects is the same way. That said, I am now going to teach you After Effects. But before I do that, we actually need to start in Photoshop. So I made this really simple drawing in Photoshop here with a circle and a square and this kind of freehand blobby shape that I've named William. If you'd like to follow along with me in this lab, you can always design your own simple drawing like this. All right, so the important thing here is that each layer has its own name, and anything that I'm thinking I want to animate separately, which is everything, I've put on its own layer, okay? So in order to get our artwork from Photoshop into After Effects, what we need to do is import it into our After Effects project. And by the way, I'm just using Photoshop for this because that's what Sarah Beth uses. The same exact thing would work in the same way with Illustrator art as well. So when you first launch After Effects, you're going to see this home window right here. So go ahead and just press this new project button. Okay, so now here's the After Effects interface, and yours might look a little bit different from mine because it's kind of customizable, but don't sweat that. What we want to do now is import our layered artwork. So I'm going to press Command I, or you could go to File, Import, File. Command I. I'm on a Mac, all right? So when we do that, we can navigate to where we have our artwork, which is right here, okay? And now this is actually really important. If you don't see these options here, you need to press this button down here, which is a little bit hidden, this options button. So if yours looks kind of blank like this, press that, and now you can see the import options. And those options are basically twofold. One is you can import as footage, which means that it's basically one layer, like a piece of video or a photo or one layer from a Photoshop document, right? Or you can import as a composition, okay? And that means, and that's actually what we want to do in this case, what that means is it imports layered artwork and preserves all the layers, okay? In this case, I'm going to choose retain layer sizes. Don't worry about that for now, right? So let me hit open, boop, and you'll see, oh yes, it's like, are you sure you want to do this? And I'm just going to hit OK, and I'm going to keep the layer styles editable. Great. So now up here in my project window, you can see that I've got a folder here now with the name of my Photoshop doc. And here are all the layers that I made in Photoshop, okay? My circle, my square, and William, right? Additionally, it has this composition icon here and this composition layer. And you're kind of wondering, what's a composition? Because that's not something that that's not a term you use in Photoshop or Illustrator as far as I know. A composition is where you do your work in After Effects. Let me double click this and I'll show you. If I double click this now, you can see that I've got my composition window up here with all these same objects that I had in Photoshop. And down here I have my timeline. And those two things make up my composition, okay? Between those two windows, the timeline and this canvas here, that's where I'm going to do all my work in After Effects, all right? So that's what it's called. It's called a composition. Now, the cool thing about this, as you can see, is that it's preserved all the layers in the order in which I made them in Photoshop, right? And even kept all of the same names for everything. So that's really awesome, and I'm hoping that means that you see that this isn't too scary right away. And speaking of very scary, look who decided to join us today. My cat named Sebastian. Hi, Sebastian. Say hi to everybody. Oh. So now that we have the artwork imported, we're pretty much ready to move into the animation phase, except that I need to just explain a few things to you first. Let's dig into one of our layers here. So I'm going to turn off my square and William, by William, and let's just focus on the circle. If I twirl this down here, you can see that there are these 5 basic properties of pretty much any layer in After Effects, okay? These are always the most basic ways that you can change this layer, all right? So position is like where it is on screen, scale is how big or small it is, rotation is how rotated it is, and then there's opacity, which is kind of the opposite of transparency. So if something's 100% opaque, then it's 0% transparent, kind of like a wall. But if something is 0% opaque, if it has 0 opacity, then it's fully transparent, like a window or something, okay, right? And something that's really important to note about all of these properties is that they have these values associated with them. So for example, position. These two numbers here are the X and Y coordinates for where the circle is on screen. If I move the circle, you can see that those values are changing. And if I move it over here, you can see that they're different from where it started, which was here, okay? So those are the values, and all properties of any layer have values, okay? For scale, the values are the scale of it. Right now it's 185, all right? I hope that makes sense. Values. Now, the other thing is anchor point, which I didn't talk at all about. And anchor point's a little bit different from the other basic transforms, okay? But it's super important. In fact, in some way, it's sort of like the most important one because scale and rotation, and to some degree or other position, but we're not going to talk about that now, are dependent on anchor point. So let me get in a little closer here. So you can see that as I scale the circle up and down, it's scaling in and out of that anchor point. And similarly, when I rotate this, it's rotating around the anchor point, okay? It's just like a really, really important thing to understand about After Effects. Anchor point is very, very important, and you kind of always want to think about the anchor point, really honestly, before you animate anything. And speaking of animating, the way that we animate anything in After Effects, always, is by setting keyframes. Keyframes are actually really important, and if you've never used any time-based software, you might not understand them, so I need to explain this in a little bit more detail. All right, so this is a little bit abstract, but bear with me here for 1 second, all right? So to animate a property really means that you're changing those values over time, right? Without change, there's no animation. So for example, if I set a keyframe for scale at 100% and then I move in time and I set another keyframe for scale at 100%, there's no change. It's not really animating, okay? These keyframes basically mark points in time where you're specifying a specific value on a property, like position or scale or whatever, okay? So for example, in plain English, if it's position we're talking about here, you'd say like the circle layer at the start of the composition is right here, okay? And then to create a change in a property over time, you need at least 2 keyframes with different values. So first the circle's here, and then later in time, the circle's here. There's a change over time. Okay, so I know that didn't make total sense just yet, but I wanted to get that technical mumbo jumbo out of the way first, all right? So let me explain it to you here in After Effects and it'll make a lot more sense, all right? So for my circle layer, for example, if I just want to animate position, all right? The way that I make the first keyframe, and this goes for any property ever in After Effects, the way that you make the first keyframe for any property is you press this stopwatch button here. Boop, okay? And you'll see now that it has made a keyframe, and it has made a keyframe where my current time indicator is. That's this sort of bar here, okay? So right at the beginning of the composition, where I pressed this button here, it made a keyframe, and that's this diamond shape here. Additionally, you can kind of see that it's like lit this stopwatch up in blue and put the little like time indicator in there. Okay, that means that like a keyframe has been made on this property, right? But that still doesn't mean that animation has been made, as I just went over, because we only have one keyframe at one point in time, right? So basically, if I grab my current time indicator and I move, just say to like 1 second here or something, now, if I change these values, I will have made an animation, okay? And I could do that in a couple different ways. I could change the values just by clicking and dragging this, okay? Or, what's even better, is I could just grab this here, okay? And you can see now that it's making this motion path. And what that means is that After Effects interpolates, which is just a fancy word for saying that it animates between the keyframe states for you, okay? This is how it works. You kind of define this state and then that state, and then After Effects moves, in this case, the object between those two states, right? So that's how keyframing works. Something else that's actually really important to know about keyframes is that they can very easily be edited down here in the timeline. For example, the easiest way to edit keyframes in a certain way is that you can push them in time. You can make these 2 keyframes closer together or farther apart. And when I make them closer together, the animation happens faster because the animation's happening over fewer frames. It's happening over a shorter period of time, right? Also, if I take the animation and I widen it out, it's now happening slower because I'm taking the same 2 keyframes and I'm just spacing them out in time differently, okay? That's another really important thing to remember about keyframes in After Effects. Finally, I also want to point out that you aren't limited to just 2 keyframes for any property or even just 1 animated property per layer, okay? You can animate everything about every layer at the same time if you want, okay? You can make tons and tons of keyframes, and generally I do, all right? So let's make a little animation here for this circle. I'm gonna take the final keyframe for position, and I'm just gonna move this to the end of the composition, right? Which means that it's just gonna be moving the whole time that it's on screen, okay? And I'm gonna go back to the beginning, and what I wanna do is now add like an opacity animation onto this. So let me go ahead and actually, I want this to fade opacity-wise from 0 to 100%. So actually, I'm gonna go to like, I don't know, somewhere over here, 14 frames or whatever. And now I'm gonna make the opacity keyframe at 100%, okay? And then roll back to the beginning, and now I will change this to 0, okay? I can click in here and just type 0, for example, or I could click and roll that down. But now you can see that the circle has disappeared from the screen. And if I were to play this back, which I haven't explained yet, you would see that this is moving and fading on at the same time. Okay, so let me actually explain playback real quick, because it's a little bit different in After Effects than it would be in like in Premiere or in like an online music player or something like that. After Effects works by it basically puts each frame into the RAM of your computer, and that's how it displays it. So what that means is you can see right here that this sort of thin bar here, there's some green in there and some spaces where there's no green. Basically, where it's green, those frames have been added into the RAM already. So this is more technical mumbo jumbo, but basically when I go to play this, first it has to put all those frames into the RAM, and then it'll start playing it at real time in a loop, okay? And by the way that you press play is by pressing the space bar, for example. So I'm gonna do that now, and it's gonna kind of go a little slower, and now it's gonna start playing at real time in a loop. And it's a little bit hard to see because it's yellow on beige, I just apologize for that. But you can see that it's just playing this loop of the circle fading in and moving, all right? And another thing to remember is that animators in After Effects are always watching stuff in loops. We're just constantly watching loops. Okay, so let's now work the rest of these layers. I'm gonna go ahead and twirl this down to collapse that, I guess, and turn on my square. Okay, so let's see. For my square, I'm going to, let's see, I'll twirl this open. And I did position and opacity. So let me work on scale, okay? So let me have this scale up to 100 and then scale down. So it's like starts at 0, goes up to 100, and then goes back down to 0 at the end of the comp, all right? So the way I would do that is press the stopwatch button, that's right, to make the first keyframe, always. And I'm gonna set this to 0. Now scale, just by the way, is listed also with X and Y, and you could unchain this, and so you could animate or adjust just the X of the scale or just the Y. In this case, I'm gonna keep it chained, all right? I'm gonna kind of go to the middle of the composition, somewhere around 115, and now I'm gonna set this to 100, right? And then I'm gonna go to the end, and I'm gonna take my 0% scale keyframe, and I'm gonna copy it and paste it there, okay? So now that's gone back into its own center. And if we preview that, it looks like this. Hey, it's amazing, okay? And now for the heck of it, what I wanna do is add some rotation to this as well, all right? So I'm going to, that's right, press the stopwatch button to make my first rotation keyframe here at the beginning. Then I'm gonna go to the end. I just want this to be continuously rotating, all right? So now rotation is listed in a kind of funny way. Whole rotations, which is the X, and then degree rotations with the degree sign, okay? So if you wanted something to rotate 3 whole times, you'd type 3 in there in the first one right here. If you just wanted to rotate 15 degrees, you'd do that in the degree part, okay? In this case, I think I just wanted to rotate 1 whole degree, so I'm gonna do that there. Or I could have typed 360 degrees, same exact thing, right? So let's preview this. All right, so that's looking really good. And what I'm gonna do is now just turn on William. And I think for William, I'm just gonna animate the kitchen sink, all right? So I'm gonna go back to the beginning of the composition and let me twirl this down. And I'm basically gonna make a keyframe now for position, scale, rotation, and opacity. Check this out, I can go broop, and just kind of twirl down on all those or press down on them all at once, all right? Now I'm gonna go to the end of the comp. And let me go ahead and I'll move him over a little bit and I'll scale him down. And why don't I go ahead and rotate him a little bit and fade him down to 0. Okay, let's check out all of that. Wow, okay, so this is amazing, and I love it, and I can't wait to send it to my client, and I'm pretty sure I'm gonna win some sort of reward for this animation. It's that good, okay? But right now it only exists in the RAM of After Effects, so how do I go ahead and take this and turn it into something tangible that I could send to my client or post on Instagram or whatever? Well, the answer is rendering. Rendering is the final stage of the motion graphics workflow. Basically, when you're done with your work, like I just said, you want to turn it into something tangible, you need to render it, okay? And there's basically 2 ways to do this. You can render through After Effects, which is kind of an old school way of doing it, or more recently, like in the last 10 years, Adobe has built a different piece of software called Adobe Media Encoder that you can use to render from After Effects, and it's really powerful, and it's definitely my preferred way to render, so I'd like to walk you through that now. So once your animation's finished, what you want to do is go up here to Composition and add to Adobe Media Encoder Q, or Option Command M on a Mac, okay? And when you do this, what it's basically going to do is it's going to take a second and it's going to launch Media Encoder, and it's going to, After Effects is going to tell Media Encoder, we want to work on this composition, okay? Simple animation, here you go. So it's basically taken all the information from After Effects and now moved it into Adobe Media Encoder, all right? Now, it will automatically drop on the sort of compression that you last put on there. For you, if you've never used it before, I'm not actually sure what it'll put on there, but what we want to do here is, no matter what it says, is drag down this, okay? In this case, we want to make an animated GIF, all right? And that's what we're going to do with Sarah Beth's illustration as well. So let me just walk you through this. So pull this down to where it says animated GIF, okay? There's obviously quite a lot of other things in here that you can turn it into, but we're turning it into an animated GIF. And then this is kind of important, all right? So you want to press this button here, or this link here, and it's going to take a sec to do this, to open this dynamic link connection. I think it's now like really checking back and forth with After Effects to make sure. I'm not really sure what it was doing there, but whatever. Something technical. And then here, okay, so I designed the art, and I believe Sarah Beth designed her illustration the same way, bigger than necessary. It's just what you do, okay? So I made it 2000 by 2000, but if I want to make this in Instagram, for example, I want it to be 1080 by 1080 square. That's optimal for Instagram. So I would change this. I would uncheck this, okay? Leave this chained, because in this case it's a square, and I would just set this to 1080, okay? And now the other thing is this quality tab. You could play around with this on your own, but 100% quality makes rather big loops, and I think you probably want to lower this down to somewhere halfway down just to lower the quality, okay? So that's fine. I'm going to hit OK here, and now here you just want to basically click on this and give it like a good name and put it in a good folder somewhere, like here, for example, and I'll just call this Simple Animation GIF, and I'll hit Save, and then I can go ahead and press this green play like button here. And it's rendering. You can see the little bar. And what we're waiting for is the render chime at the end, which is the happiest noise in the world, because that means that your work's done, all right? So now what I want to do is click on this little link here that it's given you. It'll open the file, and now here you go. It is now a tangible thing which we could post to Instagram or send to the Emmys so that they can give us an award, all right? And that's it, really. These are the steps that I always take every time I animate anything in After Effects, and pretty much anytime anybody animates anything in After Effects, including you, I hope, from now on, all right? Let's actually review these steps just to go over them again, because they're important, all right? So first of all, generally what you're starting out with is by importing art into After Effects. Now, sometimes you're making art in After Effects, but oftentimes really it's a combination of things for me. I'm importing Photoshop art, I'm importing Illustrator art, I might be working with an audio track that I pull in or a cut from Premiere, and then I might be creating art also in After Effects at the same time, all right? So yeah, but importing is a really big step, generally the first one, all right? Second, you're really working on the animation, and you're just really animating each layer until it feels right, which is obviously the bulk of the work and where a lot of the finesse comes in, okay? But once you're done with that, then you move on to the rendering stage, which we just showed you, and basically, you know, we didn't really talk about this, but you can work in a lot of different formats and sizes and things in After Effects, and you just want to make sure when you render that you're rendering the correct way for what you worked on. And also, a lot of times, especially nowadays, clients will need you to render one way and another way because they might be using the final product for different formats or whatever. So rendering is a really important step too, and something you might actually have to do more than once on any project, all right? And the final step that's really important is that once everything's all done, you get to drink martinis on a yacht while counting your money. And that's the basic workflow of any animation project. Yes, this is the exciting, exciting life of a motion designer. Thank you very much. I hope you liked this and you got something out of it. In part 4, I'm definitely going to be kind of doing the same thing, but I'm going to be using the illustration that Sarah Beth made of the clementines, which is actually going to be adding quite a lot of complexity into this. So I'm going to be bringing in quite a lot of new After Effects tips in part 4. So definitely go ahead and check that out when you're ready. Thank you so much, and I will see you in the next video.